This rig's great for getting straight down to the bottom and catching them fish once they really start getting on the feed. Right in the kisser, exactly where I want to be hooking them. Springtime, it's all about meat fishing for me, on a short pole catching big fish. And they're exactly the fish that we're looking for on that short pole line. And today, I'm going to talk you through my tips and tricks that have won me some very big money matches in the past. The reason I like fishing meat so much is so versatile in the way that you feed it, can fish it, and it generally picks out the bigger fish in your peg. With high protein baits like that, the fish just seem to love it. I've had a lot of success meat fishing. The highlight at Larford Lakes, where we are today, would definitely be the Maver match this winning £65,000. But I've won several qualifiers here, fishing for big fish on the short pole with me, or whether it be in the edge as well. I have a couple of rigs that I always use for my meat fishing. This is so you can present the bait in different ways on different days, depending how you're feeding, where you're fishing, and what species you're looking to catch. Right, this is my go-to meat fishing rig that I would always start on. It's got a 14 to 16 orange elastic, down to 020 supernatural mainline. It's so strong and durable that it's then paired up with a 0.3 carbon bobby. The reason for such a small float is that I don't want loads of shot down the line. I do this with a reverse taper, so it almost creates a natural fall as I'm flicking that rig about, trying to catch the eye of some of them carp that don't necessarily want to feed. The hook length I fish is a Kaizen Ready rig 015 with a 14 hook. The reason I use a Kaizen hook is because of the offset point. It makes it easier for hooking the meat. It's super sharp, and trust me, when that hook goes in, it very rarely comes back out. Right, I would always start my match on a 6mm piece of meat. Just a single hook through, showing as much point of the hook as I possibly can. I would always start being quite negative, probably feeding maybe 8 to 10 bits in a small kinder. I'd expect if there's any fish about to be dropping your rig in and getting a response quite quick. I'd always start on a strung out rig that generally, if there is one, it as it's dropping down, often catches the eye of them early fish. Always like to lay my rig in first, then I would feed over the top. What I do, I like to have a single back shot above my float, but a slightly longer lash. That way, what I can do is flick my rig out past and let the whole rig drop down, potentially searching out that area to try and catch the eye of a fish. Sometimes I'd flick it out straight in front, sometimes lay it into the left or the right, depending where I felt like the fish were maybe coming from. I feel like with that rig, you can be quite active. I wouldn't sit there and just literally wait over all the time. I'm quite happy to lift that rig out and relay it in before refeeding again. At the beginning of the session, I'd probably leave it maybe 6 or 7 minutes without a response before re-topping up. I don't like to chuck bait in over the top until I've maybe started getting some indications or some fish in the net. If I can, I'd always rather fish through a pot than chucking bait. I think one of the biggest things in fishing, meat fishing, is the accuracy. The way I've plumbed up my rig is I like to fish everything dead depth, just looking out for those wary bites, and just, like I say, feeling my way in. And I feel like that by fishing like this, you get the best response. It might be a case of only catching 3 or 4 fish, or one of them days where you're fishing for potentially the match winning. And straight into a fish, first drop, and hopefully one of the great big Larford residents. Oh, And they're exactly the fish that we're looking for on that short pole line. That's probably what you'd normally catch in the edge towards the end of the match, but it's early on in the session and you just trick them early fish that don't necessarily want to feed. And here we are, the proof is in the pudding. A 10 pound plus fish caught over next to no bait at all. And the best thing about this, I'm not even on the best rig yet, and it's only going to get better. Right, we've caught that lovely fish. It is literally just a case of just repeating exactly the same process. I wouldn't get too giddy now by chucking in loads of bait. So it's top up the smallest fast release kinder pot. So exactly the same, flicking out, single 6mm on the hook and just feeding 6mm at the moment. Occasionally what I would do, based upon how it's fishing, whether I'm getting false indications or foul hook any, then I'd potentially start introducing some 8mm depending what's happening in the peg. But if I can, I will always feed and fish 6mm. I just feel like you get a faster response from them, and it just generally seems better than fishing big baits that are a bit more selective to single fish. You might end up catching odd skimmers or an F1 or anything like that by just feeding some 6mm and fishing 6mm. Right, I've not had a bite now for about 5 or 6 minutes. The beauty of this strung out rig is that you can re-flick out your rig and hopefully catch an eye of the carp and get him down over the feed. The reason I plumb up dead depth is generally you don't get any silly bites or anything like that. You can read the indications. Very rare you foul hook them, and you get clean positive bites and knows exactly what's happening in your peg. It's very rare with the way it's plumbed up that you miss bites because they just suck in the bait and you'll get an indication straight on your pole float. By what I mean by saying when I'm fishing dead depth, when I plumb up, I literally just have the bristle of my float showing when I'm plumbing the depth and making sure that there's no divots or anything like that in the peg. And there we go, the proof is in the pudding. Just fed again, repeating that process, and out of nowhere we just nailed another one. The float's gone under twice now. I've hooked 2 absolute units, and that's why I like to fish at dead depth. You're not fishing for hundreds of fish, and if you get a bite you want to make it count, and I can guarantee this one will be hooked in the top lip as well. Now let's put my money where my mouth is and let's see exactly where this one's hooked. Right in the kisser, exactly where I want to be hooking them. For me, when fishing meat, it's quite common for me to move around my peg. By this I mean, if I've started on a top 5 and caught 2 or 3, I'd quite happily replumb a new line, maybe even if it's only a metre apart, and start the session again. That way you get another crack at the whip. Sometimes I may even have 5 or 6 lines on the go. By this, I don't mean that I'll be feeding all 5 or 6 lines at the time, potentially splitting the fish. I mean that I'd happily catch 2 or 3 and potentially go back to a line where I'd previously caught before. What I would normally do, I would base my attack based upon what other people are catching as well, depending how quickly I would move lines. If it was a case where there's not a lot being caught, I'd probably be a bit more patient, just sitting on the one line rather than spreading bait around. But if there was more fish being caught around the lake, I'd happily move around the peg, just keeping it nice and tight, feeding small amounts of bait, and never leaving a pile of bait there, so you can almost blow up your peg or muck up your peg based upon where you feel them fish might end up towards the end of the day. And there we go, just by starting that new line, we've managed to nail another one. The only thing I can think of early on in the session, although we're only feeding 6 to 8 bits, maybe we've just fed a little bit too much to how they want to eat at the moment. Not quite as big this one, but a proper fish nevertheless. Fishing in the wind can obviously be a little bit tricky at times. That's why I like that slightly longer lash. I have my back shot about halfway down. To be honest, the way the rig sits, just touching bottom, occasionally, if I'm honest, I don't mind if the rig moves around a little bit. But with that longer line, you can almost stabilise your float, and as it acts as almost like a boom to stop it drifting around at the same time. It just gives you a bit of flexibility in how you want to fish it. Like I say, I quite happily, I don't mind if the float moves a little bit, odd drag, just keep moving that bait, almost searching your peg with it. Not only carp, we've managed to catch one of the resident F1s. Beautiful gold looking one. Right, this is the rig that I've been keeping up my sleeve for a fair few years now. It's something a little bit different. What it is, I've got 14 to 16 orange elastic. This is super strong, powerful for that short line. When you're hooking big fish, you don't want to be messing around with them. You want to get them in as quick as possible. That's why I pair it up with 020 Supernatural line. This is strong and durable, down to a 0.5 JL. That way it takes a decent amount of shot. Now let me get on to the shotting. This is where it's a little bit different. I have all my shots sat above a 6-inch hook length. That way it gets the rig straight down to the bottom where them feeding fish are. The hook length itself is an 017 ready rig with a Kaizen size 12. Again, it's all about strength for me. And when them fish come in your peg, you don't want to be messing around, and get them in as quick as you possibly can. Pole pot selection is massive to me. I would always start on a small, feeding 6 to 8 bits, but wouldn't hesitate to step it up. But the last thing you want to do is by feeding too much too early and ruining your peg, because there is them days where you just need to move around feeding next to nothing. However, there will be days when they want to eat lots, and I wouldn't hesitate getting a big pot out, feeding 1/4 of a pot per fish. Right, having caught 5 or 6 fish now, I'm going to be trying to be a little bit more selective. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to feed, I'm probably going to double the feed up. I'm going to feed 4 to 5 8 mils and 4 to 5 6 mils. But the only thing I'm doing different now, I've got the money making rig on. Plus, what I like to do is fish an 8 mil on the hook with this. Straight away the rig has hit the bottom and we've managed to catch ourselves another F1. This rig's great for getting down straight down to the bottom and catching them fish once they really start getting on the feed. See, one thing I also like to do, if I have moved spots, if I've caught a fish on the previous line, I would quite happily look to go back there, especially later on the match, hoping that I can catch them as close as I possibly can to myself. See, what I would look to do, I would still look to just fish and feed as I go. I wouldn't be putting bait in everywhere until I realised what sort of weight I was looking for, or the amount of fish needed to win that match. My next step after catching a few fish on that new line would be to drop back into my original line, hoping that a few fish have drifted back in the area. I haven't been feeding this, and sometimes you can drop back in and they just linger around, whether it be the smell or the odd bit of bait that was maybe left there. Let's see if we can trick one. As you can see, it's quite apparent now the fish have come back in on that short line. You can start feeding a bit more aggressive, a bit more positive with that bulk down rig. And the big boys are starting to feed now. And I might need to ship up to that. Big fish that. And this is exactly why I love meat fishing. You catch fish like this by just being active, moving swims, feeding very little, and obviously that bulk down rig makes such a massive difference. And if you take on board some of the tips and tricks I've given you, I can guarantee you'll be landing some fish like this spring.